Hi, welcome to the X Factor. This is the podcast for human performance and leadership. I'm here today with Mike DeWindt, the managing partner of Gates Group Advisors in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Mike.
Steve, nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for you being here. So tell me who you are and what you do.
Well, you got my name. Again, it's Mike DeWindt, and I reside near Cleveland, Ohio, which is my hometown. I've spent the last 25 years in the private equity business, predominantly making control investments in lower end middle market manufacturing and service businesses. I now have an advisory practice, Gates Group Advisors, which builds on my private equity experience to help closely held companies grow through a combination of strategic planning and scaling and sustaining the business model, which was kind of the tenet for making investments as a private equity investor. And as a complement to my consulting business, I chair a peer advisory group through Vistage Worldwide, which is made up of 16 CEOs and or business owners from non-competitive industries.
Okay, so you're basically taking you're graduating from your private equity experience and basically going one step further with that while also doing the Vistage project.
Well, if you look at the private equity business, it's really it really can be broken down into three activities: fundraising, transacting, and working with your portfolio companies to make them more successful. The first two I didn't really enjoy very much. The second one, or the third one, I enjoy a great deal, and that is really essentially what I'm doing as an advisor now.
Okay, and so obviously you have a lot of experience with as being a leader yourself, but also working with leaders. Generally speaking, what do you think is the best aspect of being a leader?
Well, this was a great question, and as we were chatting before, your questions were very straightforward, but also thought-provoking. And if I'm going to be very honest, I would say that getting to make big decisions, whether it's creating the culture, setting strategy, building the team, executing a big deal, I miss doing that in my new role, where I certainly don't get to make decisions, and in some cases, I'm not even supposed to provide an opinion in my role as a chair with Vistage. So, kind of making big decisions, I enjoyed very much as a CEO.
Just having that responsibility and carrying that out within the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, it's something where you have a goal, you have kind of the big picture in mind, and, you just kind of keep your eye on the ball and just kind of forge ahead. And as a PE investor, it really is, progress is measured in big increments, as opposed to being an operator, which is in the trenches every day, fighting the battles, and progress is measured in much smaller increments. And I learned early on that I'm a little bit better at a higher altitude than in the trenches. It's just seemed to work better with my personality and my interests over time, and kind of what I was good at doing.
Okay, so if you see decision making as the primary leadership responsibility, either from your own experience or experience with some really great leaders, how did they go about making those crucial decisions?
Well, Steve, I see this question in a very holistic way. So there are really three areas that I think good leaders excel. First is creating the vision, charting the course, setting the priorities, and establishing a culture of accountability. The second would be bringing together and allocating the necessary resources to execute the strategy. And the third, inspiring and rewarding the team to achieve the goal.
Okay, so in your experience, either yourself or somebody that you mentored, what were the effects of following that model?
Success, frankly. And success in my past life is measured by return on invested capital, creating shareholder value and making good returns from our investors. And I just feel that, it's great to have grandiose aspirations, but it really comes down to execution. It comes down to, being consistent every single day. And I just think that, once you've set the course and path, then it really is about just, day-to-day execution. And accountability is obviously important. And as a private equity investor, creating accountability within the management team is extremely important to success, I believe.
So,
and obviously aligning interests,
mm-hmm.
That when we do well, the team does well, and vice versa. I mean, sharing in the rewards is extremely important as well.
So I'm brought in many times to work with the leaders who don't do those things.
Yeah.
So how, tell me about, or what, tell me about some of the people, or why you think some of the people who don't follow that model, why don't they follow that model? And what does it take for them to follow that model? Because it's a simple model. We all know it.
Right. Right.
Why is it that they don't follow that
model? That's a big question. I would say that failure to follow that model is probably based on discomfort around having difficult conversations, particularly in terms of keeping people accountable, mostly yourself. And I find that if you don't hold yourself accountable, you're not going to be very good at holding your team members accountable. It's setting the right expectations. It's giving people the tools to do their job and getting out of the way. So kind of being a CEO. Some CEOs can't stop being, the director of operations or, the controller or what have you. They cannot step back. And I am talking principally around smaller, mid-sized smaller businesses, the kinds of companies that we invested in and now that I'm seeking to advise. I just find that they have a hard time transitioning from maybe an entrepreneurial role, the founder of the business, to a professional manager. Mm-hmm. And those aspects and building the team and letting go, and I mean, all of this, I think are hard for some people. And as a result, we would often have to make some changes to the management team to kind of create a more professional approach. It was never our desire to go that direction because we invest in good businesses. They're good for a reason. They're mm-hmm. good people involved, a good strategy, but sometimes, the Peter principle kicks in and you need to create more capacity. So I just think that some people just kind of tap out on kind of their comfort level and their skill sets.
It's ironic because you're trying to get people out of their comfort zone, and then finally, they get real. You have to move them so far out of their comfort zone that you have to move them out of their job.
Right, and it's sometimes you know that immediately going in through your interactions and the diligence process and so forth. But sometimes you have to kind of figure that out after the fact, even though you might have a hunch or two. Certainly, it's change is often good. We talk about, particularly in Vistage, I want my members to become their best change agents in their businesses. Mm-hmm. Most of them aren't. Most of them are stuck in one thing or another, and which is, hopefully the value proposition of Vistage and creating a board of peers that can, help work through big decisions. They'll learn to kind of get out of their way and have that aha moment where, hey, look, maybe I need to be doing this instead of that kind of thing. So, continuity is a good thing, but sometimes you got to shake things up a little bit to get back on the right track.
Yeah, well, you still have, business initiatives to accomplish. So
exactly.
Yeah. So in regards to, as far as, the different aspects of human performance and leadership effectiveness, you're really an expert in strategic execution, where it's one thing to have a strategy, but it's actually a more important thing to execute the strategy. So what I like to know is, what advice would you give to other leaders regarding, strategic execution?
Yeah, I mean, certainly human performance, I don't care if you're a manufacturing company or a service business, it's all about people. Your best assets walk in and out of the door every day. I know that's a cliche, but I feel strongly about that. And, talent optimization is kind of, part of that. But around strategic execution, I think the key is to set milestones, measure everything, have the right KPIs that really tell you how the business is performing, not so much in the rearview mirror. So looking at the quarterly numbers, that's interesting, but that doesn't, usually that happens 60 to 90 days. Well, better not be that, but maybe 30 to 45 days after the end of the month or the period. That's not terribly helpful and kind of figuring out what's in front of you. So I think it's very important to have KPIs that give you, some forward clarity around how the business is performing. Be disciplined. Don't get distracted. A lot of, business executives and owners that I've dealt with, get excited about the next deal, whether it's, a new customer opportunity or an acquisition or what have you, and they don't stick to their knitting. They get distracted, and the organization, I think, suffers as a result. Obviously, you got to be pretty nimble. You got to be able to adapt to changing conditions. I mean, the current world environment is a great example. No one saw it coming, or we probably should have, but we didn't. And companies are having to really make dramatic changes and shifts in their business models to be able to survive and thrive in this new environment. And we're not all sure what it's going to look like on the end, but I'm trying to get my members in my Vistage Peer Advisory Board to be thinking about opportunities post the COVID crisis. And now that we've kind of gotten through triple P and PPE and all of that stuff. So again, the last thing would be, you have to adapt. Well, then you have to be able to adjust course and based on changing conditions. So again, I think being nimble within some discipline around the four corners of what you're trying to accomplish over the long run, right? So you're going from A to Z, but it may not be a straight line. It may be more circuitous and path, and you just have to be able to to adapt to changing conditions. And sometimes executives, maybe are too eager to pull the trigger and change direction. Sometimes they put their head in the sand. So it's not easy. Sounds easy, but it is not easy to be able to adapt to a dynamic environment.
Okay, and so who were the leadership role models, or your leadership role models, and what did you learn from them?
I love this question, Steve, and I really appreciate it. So I have three, and they're, I decided to come at it from, different realms. So the first is politics. And, it's hard to, not many of us admire our politicians these days. It's a bit of a mess. However, Nelson Mandela is somebody who I absolutely admire. Had the opportunity to go to South Africa with my daughter a couple of years ago and spent some time in Cape Town and got to learn a little bit more about the man. And I think what was, for me, it was the power of empathy and sacrifice. Leading a transformational and democratic and peaceful transition of power under circumstances no one could have ever foreseen. And I think the key to this was having empathy for the opposition. He wasn't vengeful, he wasn't spiteful, and he brought some humanity to the whole thing. And it was extraordinary accomplishment and by an extraordinary and good man. So Nelson Mandela is one. The other, I've turned to sports, and someone I always admired and had a chance to meet a long time ago is Arnold Palmer, a championship golfer and entrepreneur. And, I think what Arnie did, which was so powerful, is he had the ability to make others around him feel at ease and important. He was iconic for sure. He democratized professional golf for the masses, which, I think was, I happen to be someone who loves the game. And I think that was an incredibly important evolution back in the 60s. And, from that, he created a transcendent brand and grew and sustained it for decades beyond his best playing days. And frankly, I think it's continuing to thrive, several years after his death. So Arnold Palmer would be on my list. And last but not least, from the business world, is a fellow by the name of Del DeWindt, former CEO of Eaton Corporation, and my dad. I try not to get emotional, so forgive me.
No, I understand.
That's why I put him last, so I wouldn't fall to pieces. But what Dad did, he was the power of leading by setting clear goals, coupled with great execution. He was someone who got things done, inspired people along the way, both at Eaton and at numerous civic leadership roles. So he certainly was a hero, and not just as my dad, but as a great business leader.
I, like yourself, I also hit the parental lottery, so I certainly understand your thoughts and feelings about your dad. That's terrific. All right.
Well,
so tell me this: how do you relax or celebrate if you don't relax?
Well, I'm trying to get to relax. I have, for my tender age, I'm a lot older than I look, Steve. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old who bring me immense joy. I also have a 25-year-old and a 21-year-old. So family is absolutely at the center of my leisure time. Mostly by choice. Sometimes it's required, obviously. And as I alluded to earlier, I love the game of golf and try to play, as much as I can, given the limitations of family and work responsibilities. But I grew up in a family of golfers, and I have 2 older brothers, and enjoyed a lot of great experiences with my dad and my brothers on the golf course. And so I also was very involved, and still am, in the First Tee program, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's a national organization that provides youth development opportunities through the game of golf. And so I believe very strongly that, the life skills and values that you find in golf translate remarkably well to life overall. So, golf is, it's a great game. It's frustrating, it's challenging, but it's also character building.
Yeah, well, it is a great outlet. I can attest to that. So how can people contact you, Mike?
Steve, I can be contacted on the web. The name of the company is Gates Group Advisors, www.gatesgroupadvisors.com. And my email is mdewindt@gatesgroupadvisors.com. And, pretty easy to reach, and would love to hear from some members of your audience who are interested in learning more about the Gates Group advisory model.
That's fantastic. Well, Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and I wish you the best of luck, but you've been a terrific guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Enjoyed being with you.
All right, this has been the X Factor podcast with me. I'm Dr. Stephen Long. This is the podcast for leaders by leaders. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.